Good evening and welcome to the program, The Nigerian Governors Live, coming to you live from the city of Abuja. My name is Aonduna Inge and I'll be your host on the program today. Nigeria, more than any time in its history, is divided along ethnic and religious lines. The views recently expressed by President Muhammadu Buhari on Twitter was seen by many as a dangerous indicator that the country was flirting dangerously close to a civil war. Many believe that the mere mention of the civil war was an uncomfortable reminder of the tragic events and should not have been mentioned by the president. While many Nigerians believe there must be a deliberate project to build back the spirit of community that existed in the past. Governors are very crucial in this project as helmsmen over the different states which are closer to the people than the federal government. What should the governors do to build back the national unity? Hence the topic of our discussion today, the role of governors in promoting national unity. We'll go on a quick break and when we come back, we're going to break for the news, and when we come back, I will introduce our guests on the program today. Do stay with us. We'll be back after now.
Hello and welcome to News Bits on Nigeria Governors Live. The governor of Bayelsa State, Mr. Doye Diri, has raised alarm over increasing proliferation of arms and the worsening insecurity in all parts of the country. He spoke when the theater commander of Operation Restore Peace in the South and Southeast, DIG Moses G. Tobo, led a delegation of senior officers to pay him a courtesy visit at the government house in Yenagua at the weekend. The governor, represented by his deputy, Lawrence Erujapo, called on the federal government to adopt a holistic approach in the fight against insecurity in the country, particularly in the north. Diri noted that although peace was being threatened in all geopolitical zones of the country, special attention must be given to the northern region in tackling the issues of porous borders, alleged influx of foreign headers, and the unabated farmers-headers clashes. The Edo State Governor, Godwin Obaseki, has asserted that there is no plan to sack or retrench workers in the state, noting that ongoing reforms in the state civil and public service are aimed at improving productivity and service delivery to the Edo people. Obaseki gave the assurance while addressing participants during a stakeholders engagement of the Edo State Transition Committee with permanent secretaries, heads of ministries, departments and agencies, heads of local government administration and the judiciary at the new Festival Hall, Government House, Benin City. Lagos State Government has commenced the ritual fitting of street lights from high-pressure sodium bulb to light-emitting diode across the state. LED lighting system is in consonance with the present administration's effort to have smart electricity network that will improve socio-economic resilience of the city. The General Manager, Lagos State Electricity Board, Engineer Mukhtar Tijani, stated this at the weekend, explaining that the measure was in furtherance of the renewed campaign to upgrade public infrastructure, particularly on roads across the state. According to him, to make profound impact in the drive towards power sustainability and optimization of energy use in the state, significant change and investment is required, and the board was appropriately adopting the conventional scheme to promote energy efficiency and management. And that's it on Newsbeats on Nigeria Governors Live.
Welcome back and thanks for staying with us. The program is the Nigerian Governors Live. The guest on the program today is no other person but Atagugba Aboje. He's a legal practitioner based here in the city of Abuja, and we are going to be discussing the role of the governors in promoting national unity. Atagugba, thank you so much for coming through this evening.
Honorable, thank you for having me.
All right then. So we have seen more than ever before, we have seen a very disturbing trend across Nigeria. Never would Nigerians have envisaged that Nigerians would actually approach security buildings, raise them, kill security officers, destroy public property at will. Never would a Nigerian have imagined that. And we have seen this happening. we can also see that Nigerians right now are inclined to identify with their ethnic enclaves than with their national identities. Why is this so?
Well, if you go back into how we became a nation, it will point to where we are at the moment. You recall before the independence from the British colonialists, you recall that immediately when it was indicated that Nigeria was going to have independence, the campaign that was carried out then by the various political leaders was more around ethnic alliances. The Northern guys campaigned on their own interests. The West did that, and the East also did that along party lines. And because of that suspicion that was around the nationalities then, they tended towards a more federalist structure, in the sense that they wanted the component parts or the sub-national parts of the country to be independent, to be able to carry along their own policies for their own people. But of course you are aware that project didn't happen because of the military intervention in our politics. And if you look at the constitutional drafting process that went on throughout that period from 1959 onwards, you find that the military government always talked about how the central government was weak. And if you recall, the civil war that also happened in our history was the military government deemed it as a result of the weakness of the central government. And in effect, all the constitutional drafting committees and all the policies that led to the drafting of our constitution was to strengthen the central government to the detriment of the subnational government. Now, that in itself takes away the power from the various subnational units of the country. And every time you have an ethnic nationality at the central government, all the subnationals are suspicious because of that person favoring a part of the nation. So for us, the point where we are now, I believe strongly, is as a result of the person at the middle who has tended to favor a subnational group to the detriment of the other parties, right? And if you look at the appointments and most of the policies that have been made in this government, whether intentionally made or not, you see favors a part of the subnational group. And that in itself has led to suspicion, strong suspicion, and a strong distrust for the intention of the central government. So the central government, to my mind, is responsible for where we are right now in our history.
But from what you've said so far, it's obvious that this didn't just start today.
No, it didn't.
It's probably something that has festered for a very long time.
Yes, it didn't.
So if that has been the problem, why is it akin to the fact that this government, the government at the center, is responsible for what we see playing out today?
What I've said is a combination of our history and the way we have been governed. Now, the colonialists, right, the British people, did not do a good work of integrating us as a people. Now, we all have our cultures, we have our beliefs, we have our systems and all that. You cannot, by a stroke of a pen, suddenly merge and fuse these various cultures and various identities that we have. We need to realize that from the word go. It is when we know that our policies will now be created in such a way to give room for the subnational parts to thrive within the federal structure. But as we don't even have a federal structure, we have a fused, the unity system, which has, stunted the growth of the subnational parts. And what we are seeing, it's a struggle for these subnational parts to emerge and to assert themselves as a people. And we must give that room. If not, God knows we might implode as a people.
All right, let's get back to the governors who are at the center of this discussion today. In all of the activities of the governors you've seen so far, you look at governors probably on the opposition. I'll use a clear example like Governor Wike, who does not see eye to eye with the current administration. And then you look at Governor Tom, of Benue State as well, who has its issues, who has called out the federal government on so many accounts and called out a certain ethnic group for what has been happening, the security challenges in the state, for instance. Looking at all of this, would you say what role exactly do governors have in ensuring that we keep the peace together, the fragile peace we have now, in building some sort of national cohesion?
You know, as a country, we're a constitutional democracy, and the role of the governors is a constitutional one. So, by all means, we have to look at the constitution itself. Now, the primary duty of the government, which includes that of, the governors, is security and the welfare of the people. That's the primary duty. Now, the governors are as it were, the chief executive officers for the states. They have the duty to implement laws also, and they run the states, as it were. Now, if the primary purpose of governance is security and welfare of the people, then because of the way our government is structured, is layered, the federal government, the state government, and the local governments, you realize that the governor sits, as it were, in between the federal and the state government. And if you look at structure-wise, the governors are closer to the people than the federal government. So what it means is that the governors have a duty to implement security for the people, and to also implement the welfare for the people. So that, in essence, gives the governor a very important role in ensuring that peace is maintained. Without the governors, I don't see how the federal government can in any way even run the country, because the states will run amok without the governors. So the governors are an integral part of governance, and they have the major role. If you look at our the legislative list, concurrent legislative list, the exclusive and all that, you will see that the major thing that the federal government has is to regulate the military and all that. The state don't have that. So all the federal government has, as it were, is a military power to push their agenda. But if you're talking about the issues that deal with the people on ground, the state governors have that wherewithal to carry out their constitutional duty.
So, but how well have the governors performed in this regard? Because most times the focus is usually so heavily, now for good reason, looking at the explanations, what you've said so far, the focus most of the time is on the center and what is happening at the center. And we almost forget what the governors are doing or not doing right. So as far as unity of the nation is concerned, how well have the governors performed in this particular regard?
I personally don't think the governors have carried out very well their constitutional role in ensuring security and welfare for the people. Now, this is not without reason. Now, the major reason is because the center has usurped the powers, as it were, that ordinarily the state governors should exercise.
Have they? Because I heard the federal government has insisted, signed an order having state governments devolve, going to grant their state assembly autonomy and local government autonomy. Have they actually usurped? Is it not at the end of the day just still finding a way to blame the federal government?
No, I don't think so. And the reason is this. Governance is a question of power, and power is the question of resources. Now, the entire land in the Federation belongs to the federal government and to the state government. But if you're talking about resources that brings in money, the federal government has a hold on that. All state governors comes to Abuja to, as it were, take arms from the federal government at the end of the day, which is a misnomer. This is what we've been talking about, that our constitution is slanted against state autonomies. This is what we've been talking about. We're talking about the constitution being amended and all that. It's ongoing, but only God knows whether that process will even yield any fruit in the first place. But the reason why I say the governors have not really carried out their constitutional role, yes, is because when it comes to security and welfare of the people, they need to step up to do more. I see that the Western states, pushed on to have a security agency, the Amotekun, to protect their people. That is in line with their constitutional duty. Even though the Constitution, gives policing powers to the federal government. But again, the role which the Constitution has placed on government is security and welfare. So under that, they ought to step up. Wanton killings have been going on. People have been attacked. Security is at a loss all across the country. I believe strongly that the state government should step up in that regard and fill up that void, because the policing structure we have right now cannot cater for the security of citizens of this country. The governors cannot fold their arms and say, the police belongs to the federal, right? They are the chief security officer of the state, so they need to take responsibility.
But we've had instances where, I'm going to make reference yet again to particular recent events. We've had cases where a state governor, an incident happens, and then the state governor comes out immediately and accuses a particular ethnic group for being responsible for what has happened, and accuse the federal government as well of having an agenda in that regard. We've heard of a state governor who has also threatened members of a secessionist group of killing and all of that stuff. So when governors make inciting statements like this, regardless of whether they have the apparatus of security agents at their control or not, when they make statements like this, will this in any way engender any form of peace?
Now, state governors, because of their duty for security and welfare of the people, right, do have a duty to speak out when things are going wrong. But as people who should look at the bigger picture, looking at the unity of the country, I think their statement needs to be measured, right? Rather than inciting and making statements to incite people to violence and all that, they have a duty to maintain the peace and to protect every citizen, whether that citizen originates from their state or not. They have a duty towards every citizen within their jurisdiction. So for some state governors who come out to make inciting statements, I believe that state governor does not, in the true sense of the word, understand the duty that he has towards the Nigerian people.
Now, it's a good thing you mentioned providing safety for people who are probably indigenous to that state or not. I'd like to get your thoughts on this. I recall that some time back, at the start of the El-Rufai administration, particularly in Kaduna State, he saw the need to abolish the idea of state of origin completely from Kaduna State. And that was met with a great deal of opposition, even within Kaduna State. What is your thought about that? I mean, you find situations where persons have grown up, lived all of their lives in a particular state, and they are not accepted in that state totally, particularly when it comes to the issues of politics. And then when that individual is also making a move to his own state of origin right now, it's difficult to gain acceptance. So isn't that in itself another issue that governors should look into in promoting peace and unity, as it were?
I think it's a constitutional issue. Now, the reason why I'm saying it's a constitutional issue is because the Constitution particularly gives every Nigerian the right to live, to move anywhere within the country, howsoever he or she wishes. And that in itself means that if I have the right to move, then I also have the right to live in a particular place. The Constitution itself does not provide for state indigence. It's a contraption which successive governments have used to deprive citizens of their rights or entitlement. Because if you live in a place which is your domicile, because what that means is you have decided to live in the place and you have the intention to remain in that place, that ordinarily should give you the right to enjoy the benefits that come from that state. So El-Rufai, during the time when he abolished that, I think he had an eye on the Constitution, and he knew that the question of indigenship was not a legal process or idea, and he wanted that taken away. But the other school of thought is that using that contraption will enable equitable distribution of the little resources that the state has for people who are within its boundaries. So there are different thoughts on the issue, but my own view is that we are Nigerians. Anywhere you go and you have decided to remain in that place, you should be entitled to whatever benefit that comes from being in that place.
So perhaps the issue of ancestral lands shouldn't even be a subject of discussion?
Well, ancestral lands, ordinarily, I think if you have lived in a place long enough, then you have, as it were, a history tied to the land. I think that's where the issue of ancestral land will come from, because if you have your burial grounds there, your family have lived there for a long time, you have your livelihood within that place, you have lived there for generations, it should qualify, that place should qualify as an ancestral land. But that in itself should not be a reason to exclude other persons from the place.
Okay. All right, let's look at this very quickly. There have been increased calls for restructuring. Now, we know that when the debate of restructuring comes in, people have different ideas of what restructuring is. But how does the whole idea of restructuring foster unity? Quickly.
Restructuring, to my mind, is we need to restructure the present system which we are operating. It's not working. It's unworkable. And the reason why it's unworkable is because certain rights which ought ordinarily to be given to citizens are deprived because of the so-called federal character. And that federal character is not even implemented to the later. It's not implemented. Now, if we restructure this country, we need to restructure it in such a way that the subnational parts are viable and they are independent concerning resources on their lands, concerning how they conduct themselves, concerning their judiciary, how the laws are implemented in their place. These issues, security, needs to be deregulated, as it were, to the subnational units for them to thrive.
Okay, I'll put it this quickly before we wrap up. Currently, there's an ongoing constitutional review hearing across Nigeria. What role should governors play in focusing this review process on the important things that will foster unity in their country in 1 minute?
The governors have a duty to as it were, declare the intention of their people. And what that means, it means they need to consult widely. Unfortunately for this process, that has not been done. I'm aware there are certain parts of the nation that are in such a state that you cannot even consult. So how do we even say we are getting the opinion of people on ground to restructure the country? Some people are not even aware that this process is going on. Ordinarily, the restructuring should go down into such places like polling units to get the opinion of people at polling units for them to own the process. As it were, the legitimacy of the Constitution right now is suffering because the people don't own the process. So the only way to own the process or to own the Constitution as the people's document is to ensure that even those at the local polling units have a say in that. And the governors need to ensure that that consultation go all the way down to those areas.
All right, I regrettably, this is where we have to draw the curtains on today's program. I wish we could go on and on to talk about, touch on so many other issues, but I'm believing that in subsequent times or in the nearest future, we'll make our time to continue this conversation. I'd like to thank you so much for being a part of the program, The Nigerian Governor's Life. Our guest in the studio has been Ataguba Abuja, a legal practitioner based here in the city of Abuja. And of course, if you live here in Abuja, you can tune in on Friday by 9 o'clock on Rhythm 94.7 FM to also be a part of this program on radio as well. By 9 o'clock in the morning to be a part of the program. We'll be back here, same time, same station, TV station at 6:30 on Monday next week for another interesting edition of the program. My name is Aond Inga. Thank you for spending your time with us.
governors